They showed up after 16 years of silence, demanding a place in my home and life. I faced the ghosts of my past and the weight of old wounds, but this time I wasn't the scared child anymore. This is my story of reclaiming safety, standing firm, and shutting the door on a painful history. I want to share my story with you. I remember the first time I felt truly safe, the day I turned 25 and signed the lease on my little apartment. It was modest, brick walls and a creaky floorboard near the front door, but it belonged to me and that made all the difference. I could hang a painting without fear of it being ripped down by my mother's anger or hide behind the bathroom door without my father pounding on it until I cowered. I furnished it with thrift store finds and second-hand pillows, but every scratch on the coffee table told a story of late nights writing my way out of the darkness. This place was my fortress of solitude, built not from steel or stone, but from the determination of someone who refused to be broken again. On most weekends, I'd meet my friend Sarah at a corner cafe on Maple Street. She'd order 2 black coffees, and I'd settle into my usual seat by the window, elbows on the table, notebook open and pen in hand. Sarah doesn't need fancy words to know when I'm stuck. She just nods and says, "Tell me what's going on." And I tell her about the job I landed in graphic design, how I'm finally saving up for a small vacation, or how I blocked off tomorrow evening for a writing session. Simple things, but to me they feel monumental, like the sun bursting through clouds after a storm. We talk about my childhood sometimes, but only in fragments. I'll mention the way my father's belt buckle felt against my skin, the way my mother's voice would hiss that I was worthless. Sarah leans forward quietly, reminding me that I'm not that scared child anymore. 16 years without seeing their faces has been the greatest gift I ever gave myself. I've chased down therapy sessions, rebuilt my confidence brick by brick, and learned to trust my own instincts. My life now has routine, stability, and safety, 3 words I once believed I'd never know. The walls of my apartment are lined with books, each spine a testament to nights spent escaping into other worlds. I planted a small herb garden on the windowsill, basil and rosemary reaching for sunlight as if they understand resilience better than most people. On Saturday mornings, I brew fresh coffee, let the aroma fill the rooms, and watch city traffic below. No yelling, no slamming doors, no shadows lurking in the corners of my thoughts. Just me, the hum of the world outside, and a peace I fought tooth and nail to win. When I lie in bed at night, I still feel cautious. Old habits die hard. I check the locks 3 times and glance down the hallway before switching off the lights. Sometimes my dreams carry me back to that dingy house of my childhood, cold linoleum floors, my father's heavy boots on the stairs, my mother's laughter like shards of glass. But then I wake up, roll over, and see the soft glow of my bedside lamp casting gentle shadows across the room. I feel the mattress give beneath me, stable and secure, and I remember, I am home and I am free. Over dinner one evening, Sarah asked, "Why do you keep writing these stories if they dredge up the past?" I paused, fork halfway to my mouth, and told her that those stories remind me where I came from and how far I've come. They are my scars turned into ink. Every time I craft a phrase about dark hallways or quiet tears, I am reclaiming that power they once tried to take from me. My living room has become a sanctuary of words, a haven for someone who nearly lost his voice to screams no one heard. The best part of this new life is that I get to choose who lives here with me: books, plants, friends who respect boundaries. I get to laugh without looking over my shoulder. I get to build dreams instead of scrambling to survive. Each time I finish a day of work and step into this apartment, I feel a surge of gratitude for the simple fact that my body isn't trembling, my heart isn't pounding, and my mind isn't racing for the next crisis. I'm not running anymore. I'm standing my ground. And so here I sit, pen poised above blank paper, ready to fill it with the next chapter of my own making. The fortress of solitude isn't just these 4 walls. It's the whisper in my head that says I deserve kindness. It's the conviction in my bones that I won't let anyone control me again. It's the promise to my younger self that a better life was waiting on the other side of pain. 16 years of no contact wasn't just time passing. It was the forging of a man who finally learned he could survive and thrive on his own terms. I was halfway through a chapter when I heard the first knock, soft, polite, almost hesitant, like someone testing the water before diving in. It shouldn't have unsettled me. I'm an adult now, I'm stronger. But my heart skipped a beat anyway, and I felt that old knot in my stomach tighten like a bear trap. The knock came again, more insistent this time. My hand froze on the page, the coffee cup steaming gently beside me, the television playing something meaningless in the background. I tore my eyes from the book and listened for any other sound, wind in the trees, distant traffic, but nothing, just that knock and then silence. I told myself it was probably a delivery mistake, a neighbor asking to borrow sugar, anything but them. My pulse raced as I rose from the couch and edged toward the door, every step a reminder of the times I hid behind it, too terrified to breathe. When I opened the door, the world tilted on its axis. There they stood, my mother and father, older, thinner, their hair shot through with gray wrinkles carving lines of age around their eyes and mouths. My mother's blouse hung loosely on her frame, her lips curved in a tentative, unfamiliar smile. My father's shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on my face as though he were searching for some trace of the child he'd tormented. They looked fragile like statues chipped by time, but the sight of them sent shards of memory slicing through my ribs. The smell of his tobacco and her lavender perfume, soothing scents that once disguised screaming matches and wooden spoons, hit me at once. My throat constricted and I had to swallow twice before any words would come. Not now, I thought, not ever. But there they were, like ghosts I thought I'd exorcised years ago. My mother cleared her throat and said, in a voice so soft it felt mocking, "Hello, sweetheart, we finally made it." Her eyes flickered over my doorway, my living room, the bookshelves lined with the trophies of my reclaimed life. I saw the pity in her gaze, like I were the one struggling, the one in need. My father shifted his weight from one foot to the other and offered me a nod as though we were old acquaintances at a neighbor's barbecue. Their entitlement filled the space between us, palpable and heavy. I felt the blood drain from my face, replaced by a cold surge of anger so fierce I almost stepped back and slammed the door. Instead, I stuck my hand out and said, "What are you doing here?" My voice was steady, but the tremor beneath it told me I wasn't as composed as I wanted to appear. My mother clicked her tongue and said, "We've fallen on hard times, we need a place to stay." She didn't apologize for barging in, for the 16 years of silence, for the years I spent healing from their cruelty. She spoke as if we were old friends who'd simply lost touch, not parents who'd abandoned me to rot in fear and confusion. My father stepped forward and lit a cigarette, the flick of his lighter echoing like a pistol shot in my ears. He exhaled smoke and said, "You owe us, son. You're doing well for yourself now. It's only right you help your family." Each word felt like a punch to the gut, reigniting every wound I'd stitched closed. My legs threatened to give out beneath me, but I planted my feet firmly on the welcome mat, channeling every ounce of courage I'd spent years cultivating. They wandered into my apartment without waiting for an invitation, scanning the shelves, the framed photos of me smiling with friends, the plants thriving in their pots. They made themselves at home with a familiarity I refused to offer. The air filled with a nauseating sense of wrongness, as if someone had rearranged the furniture in my brain. My father ran his finger across a bookshelf while my mother inspected the couch cushions, muttering about how worn they looked. My blood boiled. I could almost hear the echo of my younger self begging for mercy, and I wanted to scream that I was no longer that scared kid. My voice shook when I finally spoke. "You need to leave." It came out softer than I intended, but it was the first drop of steel in my tone, the first taste of the power I'd reclaimed. They paused, their eyes meeting each other as if reconsidering a strategy. My mother's smile faltered, and for a second I thought she might retreat. Then she leveled her gaze on me, wide-eyed, innocent. "You can't do this," she said, voice quivering. "We're your parents." My father stubbed out his cigarette on the arm of my chair and stared at me with that cold, distant look I remembered all too well. "Open the door for us," he ordered, as if I were still a child who could be bossed around. In that moment, everything inside me roared to life. The fear, the shame, the doubt, they all rose up and collided with the new, unbreakable certainty that they had no right here. They weren't in control anymore, and I was done pretending I didn't see it. They didn't wait for me to protest. Before I could step back, they shoved past me and into the living room as if I'd rolled out a red carpet. My pulse hammered while my stomach twisted into knots. My mother went straight for the couch, running her hand over the fabric and muttering that the upholstery was filthy, crumpled up a corner of the cushion and sniffed it like it bore the stench of my cheap cleaning supplies. My father flicked the last of his cigarette into the corner of the rug and tapped it with his heel. "This place needs paint," he said, voice flat. "Looks like you haven't done a thing since you moved in." They spoke as if I weren't standing there, as if I'd opened my home not to my own blood, but to strangers deserving of brutal critique. They circled the living room like vultures sizing up a carcass. My mother stooped to inspect the potted plants on the windowsill. She plucked a dead basil leaf from its stem and tossed it aside, scowling. "You call this gardening? You aren't even trying." Her criticism felt like fingers digging into my chest. My father opened the bookshelf, scanning each title with disdain. "You read this drivel?" he asked, flipping through pages of a battered novel I'd read in a day while nursing a broken heart. "Why waste your time on these fantasies when you could be out earning real money?" he sneered, but I recognized the hollow insecurity behind those words. They'd never respected my passion for writing or design. To them, I was either useless or a cash machine. My mother shuffled toward the kitchen doorway, tapping her fingers on the counter. She glanced at the mismatched mugs lined above the sink and said, "Who lives like this? You need uniform dishes, you need proper cookware. Where's the blender, the microwave? Are you even eating right?" Her voice was demonstrative, dismissive, as though I hadn't spent countless nights learning to cook healthy meals after a lifetime of cheap takeout while they watched me starve in silence. My father leaned against the refrigerator door and clicked his tongue. You could do better, kid. You're not thinking ahead. You need us to guide you. He laughed softly, but I heard nothing funny in it. Their words dripped with that sense of entitlement I remembered all too well. They sat down on my couch without asking, using my cushions like thrones. My mother folded her hands in her lap and began a litany of woes about their finances, their health, a list of grievances that had nothing to do with me. She spoke of missed pensions, medical bills, crimes committed against them by charities and government officials, as if the entire universe was conspiring to punish them while I lived the good life. My father nodded occasionally, flicking ash into a plant pot. He talked about jobs he'd lost, friends who'd abandoned him, and the betrayal of neighbors when they'd finally decided to forgive him for his temper. They sounded so sure of my sympathy, so confident I'd swoop in and rescue them from the wreckage they created. It was the same dynamic they'd used on me as a child. Reel you in with their suffering, then demand your labor and loyalty. But this time I wasn't that boy. I stood by the wall, arms crossed, watching them lay claim to every inch of my home. The insult after insult fell like rain. They criticized the lack of curtains in the bedroom, the sparse decor in the hallway, the way my shoes sat piled by the door. Each crack at my life felt like a violation, carving away the sanctuary I'd built. I remembered the nights I'd trembled while they ransacked my room for missing dollars they insisted I'd stolen, the taunts that dug at my self-worth until I was hollow inside. Now they were trying to rewrite that history, painting themselves as victims and me as the ungrateful child. My blood sang with anger, but I had to stay calm. This was my home, my life, and I refused to let them bulldoze it with their entitlement. I stepped forward and said, voice low but steady, "You're overstepping. You didn't ask, you didn't call, and you certainly didn't earn the right to sit on my couch." My father looked up, eyebrows raised, surprise warring with indignation. My mother pursed her lips, brow furrowing like they'd caught me in a crime, but I pressed on. "I will not tolerate this. I will not be spoken to as if I owe you everything." For a moment they stared, flustered as if I'd grown a second head. Their confident posture wavered. They scrambled to regain control, but the momentum had shifted. The room felt charged like the calm before a storm. My mother stood abruptly, knocking over a cushion that bounced across the floor. My father stubbed out his cigarette on the coffee table, leaving a bitter scorch mark. Both of them glared at me, lips parted as though they were about to unleash a tirade. But I held their gaze, unblinking, and watched their entitlement falter. The invasion had begun, but they would not claim victory. Not today, not ever. I had reclaimed my fortress, and in this space I was the law. My mother cleared her throat and sank back onto the cushion she'd knocked loose, smoothing the fabric as if that simple act could anchor her story in truth. "You know," she began, voice softening into a practiced lilt, "we had such a wonderful family once. Your father worked 2 jobs, I baked pies on weekends, and we spent our evenings laughing around the dinner table." She smiled, eyes bright with nostalgia, but I remembered dinners where she'd fling a chair when I spoke out of line and father's booming apologies that always came too late. I opened my mouth to correct her, but my father spoke first. "It's true," he said, leaning forward conspiratorially, as if sharing a secret between innocent grown-ups. "We loved each other fiercely, then work became too much. Bills piled up and we lost the house. Your mother's back went out, couldn't handle the stress. We drifted apart, that's all." He ran his hands over his knees, shoulders slumping as though the weight of their hardships was a burden I ought to pity. I felt a storm of disbelief rising in me. I'd never heard such a twisted retelling. The house we lost was mine too, where I'd cowered in corners hoping they wouldn't come for me. The job they talked about was father's excuse to vanish for weeks. And drifting apart, I'd begged them not to leave, begging for scraps of affection they never gave. My mother nodded, brow furrowed in concern for her own suffering. "We tried to call you so many times. We wrote letters, but you never answered. You must have been so hurt. It's okay, darling. We understand how easy it is to get caught up in your own world." My stomach churned. Letters that never arrived, phone calls I never received. She had the gall to claim the high ground as if I were the one who'd abandoned them. I felt sweat bead on my forehead, my pulse thundering in my ears. The more they spoke, the clearer their lies became, each claim a stone thrown at the fragile peace I'd built. My father sighed, eyes softening with false remorse. "We tried to stay close. We missed your graduation, but we had no money. You didn't call, so we thought you were putting distance between us. It broke our hearts." My hands curled into fists at my sides. I'd begged them to send money for graduation. They refused. I'd called every night and they never picked up. I'd stood outside their old house at Christmas clutching gifts and they'd slammed the door in my face. But now they were the victims and I was the cold, unfeeling child. Their words tumbled over me, each one a lie I felt viscerally. I caught my reflection in the window for a moment, tight jaw, flaring nostrils, eyes burning with fury. I wanted to scream the truth at them, strip away their masks and reveal the monsters beneath, but I held back. Their performance was crumbling already. My mother's lip trembled as she continued. We endured so much. Your father's health, our debts, the heartbreak of losing you. We just needed a safe place to land. She reached for his hand, gripping it like a lifeline. My father squeezed back, offering her a unit of false solidarity. They looked so fragile together, a pair of castaways clinging to each other in a storm of their own making. But I saw through the facade. The way my mother's eyes darted whenever I arched an eyebrow, the slight tremor in my father's voice when he claimed they'd tried so hard, they were terrified of the truth I carried in my bones. I stood there in the middle of my apartment, the air thick with their revisionist history and the ghosts of my childhood ringing in my ears. Every lie they told felt like a brick hurled against my sanctuary, chipping away at the walls I'd worked so hard to build. I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my voice. So you just forgot the beatings, the insults, the nights I cried alone? You forgot when I begged you not to leave me at that foster home? The words tumbled out, raw and sharp. My mother's eyes widened in shock, my father's face flushed. They opened their mouths but no practiced lines came. The script had failed them. My mother's voice cracked as she stammered, We didn't do those things, you're remembering wrong. My father cleared his throat, stepping forward in a half-hearted attempt to regain control. You must be confused, he said. You have your own memories, we just want to help. Their bravado was gone, replaced with the panicked tremors of two people caught in the act. In that moment, their entitlement smothered me no longer. I realized their hardship stories were never meant to bridge the gap, they were weapons to break me down again. They wanted me to open my door and my heart, then bind me with guilt, but I'd rebuilt myself on truth, not their lies. I took a breath, steadying the rage bubbling beneath my skin. They tried to rewrite history, now it was my turn to speak. My mother's voice turned matter-of-fact, as if announcing the weather instead of appending my life. We've lost our home, she said, folding her arms across her chest in a posture that brooked no argument. The foreclosure went through last week. We're completely underwater on our loans. There's no place left for us to go. She paused, glanced at my father for support, and he nodded, lips pressed tight. So, he added, voice steady, we've decided our new plan, move in with you. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I felt the blood drain from my face, my heart lurching as if it had just leapt a too-high cliff. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out a rough sketch of my apartment's floor plan. We even marked the room we want, she said, tapping one of the boxes with a manicured finger. This one here. She traced the outline of my spare bedroom, the one I'd turned into a writing nook with a small desk, soft lamp, and shelves of blank journals waiting for fresh stories. That will be ours. It's bright, cozy, has its own window. You won't mind, will you? Her smile was sweet, benevolent, like a child asking to borrow a toy, but I felt bile rise in my throat. My father folded his arms too, leaning against the wall with lazy confidence. It's not a request, he said, just logistics. We'll bring some furniture, sort out a schedule for groceries and bills. You can cover utilities and food, we'll chip in for rent. He sounded as though he were describing a vacation plan. The audacity of it made my skin crawl. My mind raced back to every time they'd taken from me money, feelings, control, never giving me so much as an apology in return. Now they expected me to bankroll their rescue and cede half my home without so much as a thank you. I swallowed hard, reminding myself to breathe. My voice came out low, but it trembled. You can't just move in, I said. This is my home, my safe space. I built it without you. My father chuckled, a hollow sound that grated on my nerves. You'll adjust, he said. We're family. My mother wagged her head gently, eyes sweet with faux sympathy. We understand it's a big change, but it's only temporary until we get back on our feet. She didn't need to say anything else. The implication was clear. I would provide the feet and they'd wait until I got on mine. My blood pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls I'd painted, the books I'd lined up, the photographs of happier days, all threatened by their casual entitlement. I pictured their furniture creeping in, the crashing of their old TV onto my coffee table, the chatter of their troubles echoing through my sanctuary day and night. The thought made me dizzy with anger and panic. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. No, I said more firmly. Absolutely not. My mother's face flickered with annoyance, then turned cold. We did what we had to do, she said. It's not up for debate. We'll be here tomorrow with our bags. My father took a step forward, blocking my path to the door. You can't leave us out in the street, he said, voice low. Pause that ego, kid. We've earned some help. Earned, the lie tasted acrid on my tongue. I saw through their claim. They hadn't earned forgiveness, had never worked for my forgiveness, and certainly hadn't earned a room in my apartment. I shook my head, feeling a fierce clarity. You lost your home because you made bad choices, I said, voice rising. I'm not responsible. I will not feed you or give you a roof. This ends now. My mother opened her mouth to retort, but my father held up his hand. His eyes narrowed as he studied me, as if seeing me for the first time since I was a scared child. The tension between us crackled. You're being selfish, he accused. After everything, you can't even spare a room for your own parents. Their words landed like the final blow in an old fight, but something deep inside me snapped into place. The fear that had haunted me was gone, replaced by a hard, clear certainty. You're not my parents anymore, I said. I survived without you for 16 years. I'll keep surviving without you now. With that, I stepped aside and opened the door. They both stared, mouths open like fish out of water. I felt no triumph, only an unshakable resolve. Pack your bags and go, I said. We're done. The door closed before they could respond, the click of the lock sealing the deal. I stood there for a moment, breathless, but I knew I'd finally reclaimed my fortress for good. For a long moment, I stood with the door still in my hand, my heart hammering so loud I thought it would burst. I felt shock in my bones. This was the first time I looked them in the eye and told them to leave. But then something shifted inside me, cooler and stronger than anything I'd felt before. I set the door aside, turned to face them, and spoke in a voice that surprised even me with its calm authority. Stop talking about yourselves, I said quietly. You want to rewrite history, fine, but I'm not buying your fairy tale. Their faces flickered with confusion, my father's lip curled, my mother's brow furrowed. They had the nerve to look hurt as though they were the victims of a cruel prank, but I was done with pretending. I drew in a breath, steadied my shoulders, and began. You say you loved me deeply, but in 2005 you locked me in the basement for 3 days because I spilled milk on the carpet. I remember how the gray concrete walls dripped with moisture and how I pounded on the door until my knuckles bled. You left me there all weekend, no food, no water, no mercy. They shifted uncomfortably. My father's eyes narrowed. My mother's cheeks flushed. And you claim you tried to call me, I continued, but let's get real. In October 2007, you never picked up my calls for my 16th birthday. I waited by the phone for hours, tears in my eyes, thinking maybe you'd changed. Instead, you ignored me. You never even sent a card. My voice was steady. Each word struck like a hammer against the stone wall of their denial. My father took a step forward, but I held up my hand. Not done. I looked my mother in the eye. You say you missed my graduation because of money. Do you remember the day of my diploma ceremony? I begged you both to come. I sent train fare and a formal invitation you threw in the trash. Instead of celebrating, you spent that weekend gambling away rent money. That was your priority. My mother opened her mouth, but I cut her off. I kept going. You claim to have lost your home only recently. But in 2009, you evicted me from our family house and told me I was worthless. You forced me into state care. I wore second-hand clothes for 2 years because you refused to send money. You told teachers I was delinquent, that I'd ruined you. You lied about me so I'd have nowhere to go, and then you blamed me for your own failures. My chest burned with every memory I called out, but my voice never wavered. I'd rehearsed this confrontation in therapy in front of my mirror, but now it was real. My father's mouth hung open. My mother's eyes shimmered with tears, though I knew they were tears of shock and embarrassment, not regret. They had never faced accountability. I was the first person to hold them to it. I folded my arms and stepped closer. You talk about suffering, but all I heard growing up was your excuses. Your temper flared because you couldn't handle stress. Your lost jobs were your own doing, drinking at bars until closing time, coming home too late to cook dinner. You were never too busy to hurt me. Their faces crumpled. I felt no satisfaction, only a terrifying clarity. I let the silence stretch, watching as their denial cracked into something else: guilt, shame, fear. They built their lives on lies that protected them from their own guilt. Now those lies had collapsed. Finally, I spoke again. I'm not your hostage. I'm not your scapegoat. I won't feed you or shelter you. I've spent 16 years building a life where I don't have to fear you. That ends now. I took a breath, and every shiver of fear I felt moments ago was gone. You're not moving in. You're not welcome here. If you ever show up again, I'll call the police. My tone was calm. I scolded. I'd never heard myself sound so certain. My father swallowed hard, eyes darting between me and my mother. My mother wiped her cheeks with a trembling hand. They looked like children caught stealing, not grown adults demanding charity. I stepped back and opened the door. Goodbye, I said, and don't come back. As the door closed, I felt a release so powerful it staggered me. I leaned against the wood, chest heaving, and realized for the first time in my life I'd spoken the truth to them, and they had no answer. The voice I'd never had was mine at last, and in that moment I knew my fortress of solitude would never be breached again. Their carefully constructed masks shattered in an instant. The polite, worried parents vanished, replaced by the snarling figures I'd known so well, monsters I thought I'd banished forever. My father's hand shot out, slamming against the doorframe so hard the wood creaked. His face was red, veins bulging at his temples. You ungrateful little shit, he spat, voice trembling with fury. After everything we've done for you, you treat us like garbage. I met his glare without flinching, but my pulse slammed in my ears as he advanced a step. My mother's lips curled into something ugly, something I'd only seen when they thought I was too small to fight back. You owe us, boy, she hissed. We carried you for 9 months, we fed you, we put clothes on your back, you can't just spit on us like this. Her hand darted toward me, fingers clawing the air. I felt the hair on my arms stand on end. This was the same venom that used to cut me down when I was a child. The poison that drilled into my mind until I believed I deserved their cruelty. My father leaned closer, hot breath stinking of tobacco and malice. We could have let you rot in foster care, he growled. We could have walked away and left you to die, but we're your parents and we came here to help. Yet here you are insulting us, threatening us with cops. What does that say about you? His question hung in the air, but there was no logic behind it, just raw, predatory rage. I swallowed, heart hammering, but I stood my ground. My mother drew herself up, voice rising to a shriek. You think you're so strong, you're nothing without us, she jabbed a finger at my chest. We gave you everything, you're a failure if you can't even care for your own family. Her words slapped against my resolve like wet sponges, sucking at my confidence, but I'd rehearsed every line in my head. I lifted my chin. You gave me fear and nightmares, I said quietly, not love. Their faces twisted, disbelief morphing into a violent storm. My father let out a bark of laughter. Love, you stupid child, love is what we gave you, everything else is your own damn fault. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, his grip iron-tight. Pain shot up my arm. Admit you can't do this alone, he snarled. Admit you need us. My mother pressed against my other side, her weight pushing me backward. Their combined force threatened to knock me off balance, trap me in their cage once more. But I would not yield. I shoved back against my father's chest, every muscle quivering with effort. I'm done with your lies, I said, voice rising above the tempest. You think you can control me with guilt and fear, not anymore. I wrenched my wrist free and stepped back, breaking their hold. The door slammed behind me as I backed away, watching their faces contort with fury. My mother's eyes glowed with tears or anger, I couldn't tell which. Fine, she screamed. If you reject us, then you're a monster, you'll regret this. She pointed at me like she was casting a curse. You'll never find peace, you'll be so sorry, my father took up the chorus. People will see who you really are, a heartless bastard who turned his back on his own parents. The world will know. Their threats hung in the air, venomous and desperate. I braced myself against the wall, chest heaving. Their words had power once, power that had shattered my confidence for years, but now hearing them I felt only contempt. You're the ones I pity, I said. You're so trapped in your own cruelty that you can't see a life beyond it. Their faces froze, mouths snapping shut like clams. They opened their eyes wide as if struck by lightning. For a long moment we stood there, the room crackling with rage and fear. Then my mother turned on her heel and stormed toward the door. My father followed, his shoulders hunched in defeat and anger both. My mother paused at the threshold, hand on the knob, and glared one last time. This isn't over, she hissed. You'll see. She swung the door open and dragged my father into the hallway. The door slammed behind them with a finality that echoed through my bones. I pulled in a ragged breath, sliding down the wall until I sat on the floor. The room felt vast and empty without their suffocating presence. My heart still pounded, but under the terror and rage was something new and exhilarating calm. They'd unleashed their worst, tried to reclaim me with threats and guilt, but I had stood firm. The voice I'd found, the strength I'd forged over 16 years of healing had seen me through the storm. My fortress had endured the invasion. And now, finally, the air was mine again. I didn't wait for them to storm all the way down the hall. I moved to the front door, hand on the knob, and called out, "Stop right there." My voice was calm but carried a weight that cut through the echo of their retreating footsteps. They froze where they stood, my mother's hand still on the brass doorknob, my father's shoulder pressed against the hallway wall. I held up a hand, palm flat. Leave, now. I sounded like someone else. Someone who had spent years preparing for this exact moment and had no intention of backing down. My mother's eyes narrowed. "You can't do this to us," she spat. My father started to argue, but my friend Sarah stepped into the frame behind me, arms folded across her chest like a bouncer in a club. She gave my parents a look so fierce it made my mother's lips tremble. "You heard him," Sarah said quietly. "Get your things and get out. Don't make this more uncomfortable than it already is." My parents' faces flickered between rage and panic. They looked like cornered animals, threatening, but knowing there was nowhere to run. My mother let go of the door, blinking rapidly as if trying to clear an illusion. My father adjusted the strap of his bag, which they'd packed hastily and left by the couch. "This isn't over," he muttered, voice low. "We're your family." I crossed my arms. "You've made your choices," I said. "Now accept the consequences." I slid one foot against the wooden floor, steady and unwavering. My parents exchanged a glance, and my mother slammed the door behind them so hard I felt the tremor through the frame. I listened to their hurried steps fade down the stairs. When I was certain they were gone, I turned to Sarah. My legs felt weak, but my chest brimmed with relief. She offered me a small smile, eyes bright. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded, moving past her to the living room. My father's old coat was still draped over the arm of the couch, and my mother's purse lay on the floor by the door. I picked up the coat and tossed it onto the hallway bench, then reached down and yanked their bag into the entryway. "Better out than in," I said softly, more to myself than to Sarah. She moved behind me, pulling out her phone. "Just in case," she said, glancing at the dark window. "We'd already agreed that if they came back or tried to call, I'd go straight to the police. No warnings, no negotiations. There would be a restraining order if needed." I held my breath as she typed a short message to the local precinct. Potential trespassers removed, last known names and descriptions attached. It felt surreal to document the final breaking of ties, as though I were filing evidence of a crime rather than ending a toxic chapter. When she finished, she slipped her phone into her pocket and gave me a nod. Together, we moved to the front of the apartment. I held the doorknob in my palm one last time, feeling the cool metal beneath my fingers. This door had been my gateway to freedom the moment I signed that lease. It was the boundary between safety and the chaos they represented. I thought of every night I'd sat in darkness, listening for threats that never came, feeling braver with each passing year. I turned the knob and stepped out just far enough to see the lock. I retrieved a new set of keys from my jacket pocket, shiny, untouched, and knelt in the hallway. I removed the old lock mechanism with deliberate care, mindful of every click and click. The sound echoed down the empty corridor like a victory march. Sarah watched, silent and steady, her presence a reminder that I was never as alone as they wanted me to believe. Once the old lock was out, I slid the new one in, tightened the screws, and tested the latch. It snapped with authority. I stood and pressed my palm flat against the door as if sealing a tomb. My breath was slow now, lull of adrenaline giving way to a peaceful calm. I turned to Sarah and managed a small smile. "Thank you," I said. She shook her head. "You did this," she answered. "I just helped." I nodded again, looking down the hallway where my parents' echoes faded into memory. Back inside, I dropped onto the couch and let the weight of the moment settle over me. The apartment was quiet in a way it hadn't been in hours, private, untouched, truly mine again. I glanced at the locked door, its smooth surface reflecting the lamplight, and felt a rush of gratitude for the life I'd built. The scars of the past were just that, scars, not open wounds. I had faced the threat, spoken my truth, and protected my fortress. Silence filled the room, and in that silence I tasted peace more profound than I'd ever known. I reached for my notebook, pen poised above the paper, and began to write, not a story of fear this time, but of triumph, as steady and unbreakable as the lock I'd just turned.